Hello, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to be looking at some of the most well-known camera angles, the 180-degree rule and the rule of thirds. So there are a few different reasons for why these techniques have found themselves firmly engraved in the rulebook of the filmmaking world. So I'm going to be going through some of these reasons and how to know when and how to use these techniques. Right, okay, let's take a look.
Alright, let's start off with the establishing shot. So as you can probably guess from the name, the establishing shot establishes your scene. It gives your audience a full view of the space the scene is taking place in. So on one hand, establishing shots are generally used to show where the characters currently are, but it can also be used to get across what the character might be feeling. In this case, an establishing shot is sometimes used to emphasise your character feeling trapped. When you see an establishing shot of a place a character might not really want to be in, you get a bit of a feeling that they're right in the middle of a wilderness. This effect will of course only work if there is some kind of original implication for the establishing shot to draw from, like some dialogue or sound for example. There may be some noise the character is stuck with, or another character telling them they will be stuck there with no escape for many years to come, for instance. So generally it's quite a useful shot to show the full scale of a scene and one of the many ways of giving you a sense of what the character is feeling. This shot is abbreviated as ES.
So the next angle we're going to have a bit of a look at is the long shot. So the long shot is somewhat similar to the establishing shot in that you're placing your camera at a distance from your character, but rather than establishing your scene or possibly implying that your character is feeling trapped, this shot is more used to get across that feeling of isolation and bewilderment.
So you see, a lot of these angles are intended on putting you, the audience, in a character's shoes. With this one in particular, you are very distant from the character, just as they are distant from what may either be civilization or what they know and are comfortable with. It could also be used to get across the audience's distant understanding of that character and the way they are. You can tell all sorts of stories with camera angles. This shot is abbreviated as LS.
So next up is the mid shot. Now this is quite a standard shot, it's one you tend to see quite a lot. Generally it's at a sort of distance you will tend to sit from someone when you're talking to them.
It's a shot that is placed at a comfortable distance from you and the character or object. A shot that kind of sits in the middle of either too close or too far away from your subject for what you're trying to convey. So you really mainly want to use a mid shot where you only really want a standard view of your character or object in question. You want to be close enough so that you can see your subject clearly, but not so close that you're obscuring the rest of them or it. This is abbreviated as MS.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the close-up. So, just like the establishing shot, a close-up is pretty much just what it says on the tin. It's pretty much a shot that is at less of a distance from your subject than a mid-shot is.
Now something worth mentioning is that the closer you place your camera to your subject, or at least in this case your character, the closer you are bringing your audience to them on an emotional level. You, as the audience, are situated at more of an intimate and personal distance from them. It's also a really good way of showing the audience something that a character may not have noticed. This can be conveyed through other shots as well, but this is a good way of showing that in more detail. This is also a good way of showing a specific action of a character, like picking something up for example. Usually when you close in on an action, it tends to indicate that it's important to keep in mind for future reference. This shot is abbreviated as CU.
Okay, so next up is the extreme close-up. So just like the close-up, the extreme close-up is generally used with the sole intention of bringing your audience closer to your characters. Only with this shot, that is of course even more the case.
It's well known that the eyes are the windows to the soul. Now, what a better way to bridge a gap between a character's soul and your audience than to place your camera as close or to zoom into their eyes as much as possible, am I right? But of course it doesn't have to be the character's eyes that you're using this shot on. It could be the hairs standing up on their arms as they feel in an intense emotion. It's shots like these that make all the difference in your story. This can also be used in the same way as your close-up, in the sense that you can show your audience even more detail of something they might need to get a more detailed view and understanding of in order to put the pieces together. This shot is abbreviated as ECU.
Now last but not least, we have the over shoulder shot. Okay, so now this is a shot that ties in nicely with the rule of thirds, which I'll cover a little later. But for now, what I will tell you is that it's generally a shot that's used when filming a conversation between more than one person. And it's pulled off by having the character whose shoulder is being looked over placed either in the bottom left or the bottom right, with the character in question either around the top right or the top left of the frame. This shot is abbreviated as OS.
So something I think that's worth mentioning is the fact that often the reason why an over-shoulder shot is used instead of just a simple close-up on the character who's currently talking is that one of the people involved in the conversation is hiding something and isn't opening up to the other person, and vice versa. But of course this isn't always the case. It can also be more to do with adhering to the rule of thirds, which we'll go over a little later.
Okay, now let's take a look at the 180-degree rule. So as humans, we've always been pretty comfortable with symmetry, so anything that isn't symmetrical tends to be quite jarring.
So what the 180-degree rule proposes is that if you film each shot from the opposite side to where you filmed your previous shot, it flows much better when you're cutting from shot to shot. There are some exceptions to this rule, like if you're deliberately trying to jar your audience, but there's got to be a good reason for it. This is something you'll notice mostly in a conversation between two people, or at least in a face-to-face conversation anyway. But of course, as each character delivers their line, we cut to their face. Sometimes there can be an exception to this if you want to emphasise the other character's reaction, but generally this is how you want to go about it.
Right, so to finish, let's have a look at the rule of thirds.
Now the rule of thirds is something that has also slotted itself very firmly into the filmmaker's rulebook. Okay, so let's imagine just a regular frame. Now let's chuck in a 3x3 grid. You see where each line intersects, these are your points of focus. The reason for this is that, although naturally you would probably presume our main area of focus is right in the middle of our field of view, but it's actually in each corner of our eyes. This is because we are hardwired to be wary of any potential threat in our periphery. So because of this instinct, that is where our eyes are naturally drawn to. Basically, you want to put your subject of interest, be that a person or an object, in one of these four corners. Often what I try to do is, say I'm filming a conversation between two people, we'll have the subject of interest in one corner, and in the corner opposite to it, I'll have the shoulder of the character they're talking to. This can also apply to, say, an object that's being used. That object will be in one corner, and the hand of the person using it will appear in the opposite corner.
So there you go. I hope you found this useful. I look forward to seeing how you apply this in your own films and what you come up with. And so yeah, you know, if you want to see more of this sort of thing, so be that filmmaking related, VFX related, graphic design related, or you know, gear related, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn the notifications bell on to stay updated. Otherwise, if you like this, give it a like. If you disliked it, obviously dislike it, that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, if you have any questions or any constructive criticism, be sure to leave it down in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.